Hey, the baby seems to have something to say. Lynn, my 8-year-old niece, said this while glancing sideways at my eldest son, Kyle.
What are you talking about? A baby can't talk.
Kyle, thinking it's just a child's nonsense, laughed off what Lynn said, but both my sister Isabella and I looked at Lynn as if remembering something. Our grandson Liam blinked his large eyes several times and looked up at me and Isabella as if he had something urgent to convey. It's not a lie, I can hear this child's voice. Despite being ridiculed by Kyle, Lynn stared back at him with teary eyes, as if it were her mission to convey the baby's words. Ashley, my son's wife, watched this scene in astonishment.
Well then, what is he saying? I'll listen especially for you.
Kyle shot a disdainful look at Lynn, a gaze far too severe for a little child. Kyle cast a disdainful look at Lynn. It was a harsh gaze, one that shouldn't be directed at a small child. I'm Jessie. I'm currently 50 years old, living with my husband Jameson, an office worker, and our dog Milk. Up until 7 years ago, our eldest son Kyle lived with us. After graduating from junior college and starting work at a factory, Kyle moved out to live independently. Kyle has always been rebellious, often disobeying us. Even when the stern Jameson admonished him, he wouldn't listen and occasionally ended up in the care of the public due to his antics outside. Each time this happened, Jameson and I would apologize profusely and scold Kyle. However, it seemed neither upsetting others nor police warnings bothered Kyle. He repeatedly caused similar troubles. As a child, Kyle was like the young boss of the neighborhood, dominating his elementary school friends. It was somewhat cute back then, but as he grew up, his delinquent behavior escalated, causing injuries and inconveniences to others, leaving us, the Jamesons, at a loss for what to do. We even considered sending him to a rehabilitation center before he finished junior college. However, when he landed a job at a respectable company upon graduation, we were overjoyed, hoping he was finally turning into a responsible adult. As a working professional, whether due to being busy or a change of heart, Kyle no longer got us called to the police station like before. Living on his own, he seemed to have taken up household responsibilities, perhaps indicating a change for the better. Anyway, Jameson and I finally felt relieved from the sternest task of parenting. It was 2 years ago that Kyle brought home Ashley, saying he wanted to marry her. Kyle was 25 then, although it seemed early for marriage by societal standards. We who never expected the once wayward Kyle to settle down properly were ecstatic about his announcement.
This is Ashley, the woman I'm marrying. Picked her up around town.
I was a bit concerned about Kyle referring to his future wife as this dude, but I didn't point it out since his poor choice of words wasn't new. Nice to meet you, Ashley. Ashley, the woman Kyle brought home, was slender, beautiful, had a modest demeanor that showed respect for Kyle, almost the epitome of a wife. I'm Kyle's mom, Jessie. Nice to meet you. Pleased to meet you too. Ashley greeted us quietly and reservedly. I wondered what Ashley saw in Kyle, but maybe he had impressive qualities that he didn't show us.
We're planning to get married next month.
Kyle reported this in a casual tone. His usual confidence didn't prompt any particular concern from Jameson or me. If they had decided together, there was no need for us to interfere.
By the way, the other day at work,
Kyle quickly wrapped up the marriage announcement and started talking casually about his work. Most of it was him bragging about how he had saved the day at work or taking the blame for a subordinate's mistake. While we listened half-heartedly, Ashley nodded along solemnly to Kyle's stories. I could see why Kyle was smitten with someone who listened so attentively. It was impressive how Ashley didn't tire of listening to Kyle's endless self-praise rather than discussing her own matters. Ultimately, Kyle's marriage announcement ended up being mostly about him talking about himself. While Kyle was in the restroom, I couldn't help but ask Ashley how she was holding up. Are you okay, Ashley? He talks about himself a lot, doesn't he? No, I'm used to it. It's fine. Really. Ashley gestured as if to reassure me, indicating it was no big deal. If you ever need anything, just let me know. We're family now. Thank you very much. I noticed tears welling up in the polite Ashley's eyes, which surprised me. Oh, sorry. Just some dust, she said, wiping the corner of her eye. Perhaps she was experiencing some post-wedding blues. I remembered feeling overwhelmed when I first met my in-laws to announce my marriage. That day, I watched Ashley leave our house with a sense of nostalgia. To think Kyle would end up with such a wonderful wife, I can finally breathe easy.
Indeed, it's been a long journey, but well done to us both.
Jameson and I celebrated our shared memory of parenting Kyle, and we enjoyed some fine wine that night. We got a bit more tipsy than usual and headed to bed early. 2 years have passed since Kyle and Ashley got married, and earlier this year, they welcomed a baby boy. His name is Liam. And from the photos, he looks like a strong baby with features resembling Ashley's. However, Jameson and I haven't met Liam yet. Whenever I contact Kyle about meeting him,
I've been really busy lately. Ashley doesn't want us to, so please stop asking.
He was reluctant to agree. Initially, we hesitated to visit right after Ashley gave birth, thinking it would be too much for her, but even after several months, we received no affirmative response from Kyle. Finally, Jameson and I couldn't wait any longer and decided to visit their home secretly. It was a bright Sunday afternoon. Hello? Kyle and Ashley lived in a rental apartment located about a 40-minute drive from our house in a somewhat secluded area. When I rang the doorbell, Ashley opened the door. Jesse and Jameson, what brings you here? Ashley, whom we hadn't seen in a while, looked somewhat frightened upon seeing us. She looked thinner than before. Perhaps gaunt would be more accurate description. Sorry for the sudden visit. We just really want to see Liam's face. We couldn't wait any longer. Is it okay now? Yes. Please come in. We hesitantly asked, thinking it might be a busy time for her, but surprisingly, Ashley let us in easily. As soon as we entered the house, we noticed the smell of cigarette smoke. Jameson frowned. I was also shocked to smell tobacco in a house with a baby. However, without mentioning it, I proceeded further into the room. Finding Liam asleep in the crib in the living room, both Jameson and I smiled. He stirred slightly but continued sleeping. He's adorable! Thank you. Ashley's tired face brightened into a slight smile. Is Kyle not around today? Yes, he's out with friends. Oh dear, leaving you and Liam behind? It's usual for him. Her response hinted at Kyle's habit of going out on his days off. I wondered if this was a regular occurrence. Is Kyle helping with the parenting? I noticed the smell of cigarette smoke earlier. Is that from Kyle? Ashley didn't answer. She just looked down. Her silence spoke volumes, and I felt a deep sadness. That's terrible. I'll talk to him, tell him to be more supportive. Please don't. I was taken aback by her clear refusal. I had intended to confront Kyle about neglecting his responsibilities, given Ashley's evident exhaustion, but perhaps she saw it as meddling. I appreciate your concern, but I don't want him to think I complain. Oh dear, Ashley feared being blamed if I complained to Kyle about his behavior. But doesn't that make it hard for you? I'm fine, so please don't say anything to him. Left with Ashley's firm request, Jameson and I were at a loss for words. Understood, but please, if anything comes up, don't hesitate to talk to us. We're here to help. Thank you. I knew that Ashley had grown up in a single mother's home and that her mom was currently hospitalized. That meant aside from Kyle, Jameson and I were the only family she could rely on. I wanted to do anything I could to help make life a little easier for Ashley. Our conversation continued and my heart ached as I listened to her talk about Kyle's careless lifestyle and his terrible attitude towards her. I hadn't realized that Kyle had been treating Ashley so badly in the time we hadn't seen her. Despite Ashley's refusal, I secretly resolved to confront Kyle if he continued to behave poorly. A week after Jameson and I visited Ashley to check on her, Jameson had to work on his day off, so that Saturday, Isabella and her 8-year-old daughter Lynn came over to our house to play. I have always had a close relationship with Isabella, and we frequently get together like this even now that we are adults. However, it had been half a year since I last saw Isabella. When they arrived, Isabella and Lynn first petted our dog Milk. Lynn, who didn't usually interact with dogs, looked curiously at Milk. "Isn't she cute?" Isabella remarked. "Yeah," Lynn nodded earnestly. Then, I served coffee to Isabella and Lynn, and we caught up on each other's lives. Unlike me, a housewife, Isabella worked part-time and shared some complaints about her boss. It was probably one of her few chances to vent her stress. I listened to Isabella's stories, nodding sympathetically. Meanwhile, Lynn, who had been playing with Milk, suddenly turned towards us and stared at me with her big eyes. "What's up, Lynn?" When I asked, Lynn began, "Well, you see..." Milk says, "Thank you for always taking care of me," but she also says she wants more frequent baths. Not once a month, but maybe once a week. What? I was bewildered by Lynn suddenly speaking on behalf of Milk. Looking at Isabella, she seemed surprised, saying, "Oh dear." It's common for young children to pretend to talk to animals, but mentioning specific details about the frequency of shampooing was puzzling. Moreover, the once-a-month schedule was accurate. I did want to bathe Milk more often, but recently I have been too busy. Lynn, did Milk really tell you that? Yes, she looked like she wanted to talk, so I asked her. At first, I thought Lynn was either lying or imagining things. But then Isabella said, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. I was shocked when she started to explain. Once, despite the weather forecast predicting a sunny day, she insisted that a storm was coming and that we should stay home. We didn't have any plans, so we stayed in. Sure enough, as Lynn predicted, the weather turned foul, with signs flying around outside. We were glad we didn't go out. That's incredible. There's more. She found my lost car keys immediately, and like now, she talks to dogs during walks. No one believes us, but I know she has some extraordinary ability. Isabella said this while patting Lynn's head. If what Isabella said was true, then I too believe that Lynn might have some unique ability. It was unbelievable, but having witnessed Lynn's ability firsthand, I couldn't help but believe it. After speaking for Milk, Lynn seemed satisfied and returned to playing with her normally. How about you, sis? How have you been lately? As I glanced at Lynn, Isabella's question reminded me of last week's events. Actually, I met Liam for the first time the other day. I shared everything I saw at Kyle and Ashley's home with Isabella. How Kyle left his wife and child at home to go out on Sundays, his smoking habit, and his demeaning attitude towards Ashley. With every detail, I saw Isabella's brows furrow in concern. That's awful. Kyle has always been a handful, but I thought he was doing better recently. Yes, but it seems I was mistaken. It's just too sad for Ashley if things continue like this. Indeed, and worrying. How about we go visit Ashley together next time? Maybe we can help somehow? Of course, we'll let her know in advance. Alright, I'll ask her. The following weekend, Isabella, Lynn, and I visited Kyle and Ashley's home again. After informing Ashley beforehand, we learned Kyle was out again, which worked out well. However, I still couldn't help but feel uneasy about Kyle regularly leaving his family on his days off. Hello, Ashley, sorry to come by again. No, it's fine. It's just me and the little ones, so anytime is good. Hello. It had been about 2 years since Isabella and Lynn last saw Ashley at a family meeting, so it was quite a reunion. Lynn greeted softly, and then ran over to Liam, who was lying in bed, gently stroking his head. She seemed to like the baby. We watched Lynn's interaction and then sat down at the dining table. Ashley appeared even more exhausted from childcare and housework than before. Isabella frowned at this, her gaze full of sympathy. How has Kyle been since then? No change. He yells at me to stay home if I try to go out, and he freely drinks and smokes. Whenever I try to object, he shouts. Who do you think is earning the living for this family?" As she spoke, tears welled up in Ashley's eyes. Isabella offered her a handkerchief. "That's unbelievable. I feel like doing something to get back at him." I was infuriated by Kyle's appalling behavior. If only we could find some leverage against him, something that could even involve the police. Isabella muttered this, and Ashley suddenly gasped as if remembering something. "It's not police related, but recently someone came to our house for debt collection. It was when Kyle wasn't home, so I was confused and said it must be a mistake, but they insisted."
This is Kyle's house, right?
"What? That happened? Ashley, do you have any debts?" "No, I don't. The house is rented and there is no loan or anything like that." Isabella and I exchanged glances, puzzled about what this could mean. Could Kyle be incurring debts without Ashley's knowledge, unable to repay them? While doubts swirled in my mind, I was searching for words to respond.
I lost again today. Just my luck."
The sound of the front door being roughly opened, followed by Kyle's voice, made everyone's face freeze.
What is Mom here?
Kyle, glaring at me, reminded me of his rebellious and delinquent days. "I'm sorry for intruding like this. We were just worried about Ashley." Kyle was surprised to see not only me, but also his aunt Isabella and his cousin Lynn. Relieved to see only family members, he demanded Ashley bring him some alcohol. Ashley hurried to the kitchen. "There's no more alcohol left."
"What? I don't care. It's the wife's job to replenish it when it runs out, right?"
I'm sorry." Ashley shrank under Kyle's arrogant demeanor like a king in his court. I couldn't help myself. "Kyle, wait a minute," I shouted, but Kyle didn't even glance at me, just kept glaring at Ashley. I was searching for a way to discipline Kyle when Liam started crying in his crib. Ashley quickly looked up, about to go to Liam, but Kyle's fierce glare made her freeze in place. I exchanged glances with Isabella, trying to communicate silently for a solution. It was at that moment, it was then that Lynn, who had been watching Liam, spoke up. "Hey, the baby seems to have something to say." Lynn said this while casting a sideways glance at Kyle.
"What? You kidding? Babies can't talk."
Kyle, thinking it was just child's play, laughed out when Lynn said, but both Isabella and I looked at Lynn as if suddenly remembering something. Liam blinked his large eyes several times, looking at me and Isabella as if he had something urgent to say. "It's not a lie. I can hear what he's saying." Even though Kyle ridiculed her, Lynn, with tears in her eyes, stared at him as if it was her mission to convey the baby's words. Ashley watched the scene in astonishment.
"Well then, what is he saying? I'll listen, especially for you."
Kyle cast a disdainful look at Lynn. Such a gaze was certainly not appropriate for a small child. I watched tensely, waiting for Lynn to speak next. He says, "Daddy is planning something bad." "Mommy, don't be fooled." At Lynn's words, Kyle's shoulders slightly shook for a moment. Ashley looked shocked. Isabella and I quickly realized that Lynn was about to demonstrate her mysterious ability. "Lynn, what do you mean?" I urged Lynn to tell us more in detail. Lynn paused with an then continued. "He says, Daddy writes secrets in a notebook and always hides it behind the bookshelf. Also, I love Mommy. Daddy is scary." And he's crying. After saying this, Lynn scanned the room and then ran over to the bookshelf at the end of the living room. Ashley shivered upon hearing Lynn's words. Lynn pulled out about 3 books from the shelf and seemed to find a small notebook hidden behind them, which she handed to Isabella. "This is it." Kyle's face turned pale upon seeing the small notebook. Lynn handed over. Isabella, observing Kyle and Ashley's reactions, opened the notebook. "This is a life insurance policy. The insured is Ashley and Kyle is listed as the beneficiary? There's even a contract attached." Ashley's face turned pale, and I took the notebook from Isabella to see its contents. As Isabella had said, it detailed a life insurance policy for over $1 million on Ashley, along with a contract. I couldn't believe my eyes. Kyle, what is the meaning of this? I had known Kyle to often engage in delinquent behavior, but I never imagined he would do something so cruel to his own wife. I glared at Kyle. I wanted to confront him about this life insurance policy right away.
I had to. I'm out of money. Besides, everyone takes out life insurance, right? It's not like I was planning to do anything to Ashley.
Kyle rattled off excuses as if unrepentant. The story of debts Ashley mentioned corroborated his lack of money. It's pretty clear what he was spending his earnings on, even without asking. Given Kyle's habit of leaving his wife and child almost daily to go out and play, he probably squandered the money on pointless fun. Normally, people take out insurance on themselves, right? Secretly taking out a life insurance policy on Ashley and pretending ignorance is wrong. Kyle stumbled over his words at my pointed remark. Then, as if to add to the attack, Lynn spoke up again. The baby told me he said Daddy was talking to himself about stealing money from the company and getting fired, and he's planning to do something bad to Mommy to get money. What? I couldn't help but raise my voice at Lynn's words. Fired from the company? Then what had he been doing on weekdays during the day? Turning, I saw Ashley too, staring at Kyle in shock.
What are you talking about? There is no proof.
Kyle spat at Lynn in contempt. I stepped in front of Lynn and unleashed all my pent-up anger. Proof? Lynn has just told you everything. She understands what babies see, and it's no coincidence she found this notebook. Everything Lynn says is true. You have seen the life insurance contract with your own eyes. Stop making excuses and apologize to Ashley. I scolded Kyle furiously more than I ever had before. It pained me to know that my son could do something so terrible to his wife. He had boasted about covering for his subordinates' misdeeds at work, but the real wrongdoer was himself. It was shameful and sickening that my own son could stoop so low.
This is ridiculous.
Kyle scratched his head and twisted his face in frustration, but it was all his own doing, and no one felt sympathy for him. My reprimand seemed to give Ashley the courage to speak up, having been silent until then. I never imagined I was being treated so terribly. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Pay off your debts yourself. Goodbye. Ashley left those words behind, grabbed Liam, and rushed out of the house. We watched in stunned silence. With Ashley gone, Kyle,
this is a joke.
He muttered in complaint, but after being thoroughly scolded by Isabella and me, he finally slumped his shoulders. Although it was an unexpected turn of events that Ashley left, I felt it was good that Kyle's misdeeds were exposed. Looking at Lynn, she seemed to have said all she wanted to and appeared content. I'm hungry, she said, stretching. Shall we go get something to eat? Well, we'll be heading off now. Isabella, Lynn, and I left Kyle's house. It wouldn't be surprising if debt collectors showed up at this house at any time. I wasn't Ashley, but I also thought I would never return to this house again.
Why?
Kyle was still yelling as we closed the front door, but we ignored his pathetic voice and left the apartment. A few days later, worried about Ashley, I contacted her. Sorry to worry you, I have gone back to my grandparents' house. Please, feel free to visit Liam anytime. Hearing that she was safe brought relief. Ashley had sent divorce papers to Kyle soon after that day. Kyle was initially reluctant to agree to divorce, but when Ashley firmly insisted she wouldn't let him see their child unless they divorced, he finally gave in and the divorce was finalized. Ashley mentioned she had returned to her grandparents' home as her mom was hospitalized and she was looking for a job. She planned to enroll Liam in a childcare center soon. Kyle's difficult days began thereafter, working as a part-timer every day to pay off his debts. Initially, he begged Jameson for money, but after hearing the full story, Jameson became furious.
Don't ever come back home,
he scolded Kyle harshly. As a result, Kyle stopped asking us for help. I don't feel sorry for him. He brought all this upon himself. As for me, Just like Ashley suggested, I occasionally visit her grandparents' house to play with Liam. Despite the hardships Ashley endured because of Kyle, she and her family graciously welcomed us, including Isabella and Lynn, without any resentment. I can't help but respect Ashley and her family for their openness and kindness. Lynn, do you know what Liam just said? Yeah, I'm happy to play with mommy and the grandparents. Really? That's wonderful. Ashley, who was oppressed by Kyle, turned out to be a genuinely nice, courteous person. That's why she still treats us without any prejudice. For me, this was more than enough.
My name is Rachel, and currently, I reside in an annex of my in-laws' house with my husband, Stefan. While Stefan lives in the main house with his parents, I am the sole occupant of the annex. Originally, this annex was a small structure built by Stefan's grandfather as a personal project to create a private space. Over time, it has been converted into a living space approximately the size of a room, thanks to my efforts. Initially, Stefan and I lived in a regular apartment for about 3 years after our marriage. However, his parents, who greatly adore him, suddenly expressed their desire to live with Stefan. In response, Stefan, as the dutiful son, declared that he also wanted to be with his parents. Witnessing their emotional reaction, including tears and embraces, I found myself taken aback by the heartfelt scene. Stefan and I first crossed paths at work, where he was my direct subordinate when he joined the company midway through his career. We became a couple after 3 years of dating. Throughout that dating period, he resided at his parents' house. It appears that this prolonged stay fostered a sense of homesickness in both Stefan and his parents. Stefan, who had been pampered at home, seemed to have never been involved in any household chores. After our marriage, when I suggested sharing housework, he appeared reluctant, stating that he had never done any housework before. The problematic aspect was that, despite my intention to divide the chores between us, Stefan seemed to have never considered participating in household tasks himself. I sensed a pattern in all of this. Whenever I attempted to involve him in household chores, Stefan would feign interest for a brief moment, grow disinterested, and eventually say, "This isn't for me. You're better at this, Rachel. You should keep doing it." Both of us were employed, and given my higher position at work, I felt a greater need to share the household responsibilities. However, encouraging him to help often proved to be more time-consuming than handling everything myself. It reached a point where I found it less troublesome to manage everything alone. The dynamics shifted when I transitioned to remote work. Stefan, seemingly surprised to find me at home every day, initially understood the change. He stopped complaining about my altered lifestyle, or so I thought. It became apparent later that he hadn't fully grasped the implications of my decision. Several years into my remote work, Stefan's parents suddenly visited our apartment, expressing a desire to live with him. Witnessing their emotional reunion, I felt a sense of isolation and bewilderment. Eventually, with Stefan's wish to be with his parents, we made the decision to move into their house. Stefan consistently chose locations close to his parents, whether it was for renting an apartment or selecting a job. For me, remote work made the location irrelevant, but his choices required us to uproot ourselves and quit our jobs. Upon settling into his parents' house, Stefan's mother expressed gratitude, saying, "Thank you for taking care of Stefan all this time. From now on, I will take good care of Stefan. Rachel, please take care of everything else." Initially, I interpreted this as a relief from doing housework for Stefan, but soon I realized her intentions were different. My mother-in-law's tasks involved preparing special meals exclusively for Stefan, meticulously laundering only his clothes, ensuring his shoes and belongings stayed immaculate, and purchasing various items specifically for him. As for all other household chores, those for Stefan's parents and myself, including cooking and laundry, were now solely delegated to me despite my ongoing commitment to work. Now, I found myself burdened with the responsibility of not only managing household chores for Stefan's parents and myself, but also maintaining the cleanliness of the larger family house. The prospect left me disheartened. Despite my efforts, this cohabitation seemed to bring happiness only to Stefan and his parents, with no apparent benefits for me. In fact, it felt like my burdens had increased. During one cleaning session, my father-in-law approached me with a request. He looked apologetic as he explained, "Rachel, I have a favor to ask. Could you contribute some money?" Confused, I inquired further. He elaborated, expressing his difficulty in asking Stefan to contribute to household expenses for both of us. Apparently, Stefan had worked hard, and it felt challenging to request financial contributions from him. Stefan and I had previously agreed to share expenses like apartment rent and other living costs. However, Stefan often tried to get me to pay for various items during our shopping trips, including unnecessary ingredients, alcohol, clothes, and accessories. When I resisted, he would act like a child denied a toy, calling me stingy. Despite these financial disagreements, I found comfort in the fact that, apart from these issues, Stefan didn't interfere much with my everyday life. This sense of comfort changed when we started living together, as Stefan's mother began to disrupt my routine. Unlike Stefan, she relentlessly interrupted my work at home, insisting I prioritize household chores. She would barge into my room, pulling on my clothes, making it impossible for me to focus on my work. Frustrated, I discussed the matter with Stefan, anticipating him to take his mother's side. Surprisingly, Stefan listened and promised to talk to his mother. I hoped for a compromise that would consider both our needs. Little did I know that Stefan's idea of a compromise would involve banishing me to the annex, a new, private room. I approached Stefan with a question about the hut, jokingly asking if I could even demolish it and build a new house. To my surprise, he casually replied, "You can even demolish it and build a new house if you want." Taking his words seriously, I promptly began remodeling the hut according to my taste. Engaged in cleaning, renovating, and changing wallpapers, I noticed that Stefan never once showed his face. Despite being married, it became apparent that Stefan had no intention of living in the remodeled hut with me. As I transformed the space, it dawned on me that within the family living trio, I was the only outsider. There were instances when I found myself alone at home, either when they went out to a barbecue restaurant or when I had to work overtime and missed out on shared meals. While these spirited plans were usually concocted by Stefan's mother, it seemed clear that she might have been the driving force behind my exclusion, perhaps hoping I would quickly leave her son. Despite this, Stefan had given me the freedom to do anything with the hut, and I took full advantage of it, engaging in DIY projects, installing new shelves, and personalizing the space. I made it my own. Interestingly, neither Stefan nor his parents ever visited the hut after I moved out. Although they must have been aware of my renovations, it seemed like I was no longer considered a part of their family, and they had no interest in my activities. Living away from the main house, especially without Stefan's mother around, I began to relish the independence, almost like living alone. I found solace in the fact that staying in the hut prevented her from interfering with my work. Installing new locks and enhancing security during the renovation, I ensured that no one, not even Stefan or his parents, could enter without my knowledge. It led me to reconsider if this new separation wasn't such a bad arrangement after all. However, it seemed my mother-in-law had anticipated my feelings. Unable to tolerate the treatment any longer, I found myself at a crossroads, contemplating my next move. As I settled into the renovated cabin, my mother-in-law's desperation to drive me out became palpable. Her petty harassment started with leaving trash in front of my cabin on garbage day instead of at the collection site. Sometimes, she would host barbecues in the garden without extending an invitation, intentionally wafting the smell of grilled meat towards my cabin. Despite her mild attempts, I couldn't help but smile at her futile efforts to push me away. Then, one day, she summoned me to the main house under the pretense of leftover meat and potatoes. Sensing there was more to it, I went along. Upon arrival, only she was present, and she placed a single piece of paper on the living room table. a divorce paper. It was clear that the real reason she called me was to present this document. If his mother instructed Stefan to submit it, he would do so without hesitation. All that remained was for me to agree, and Stefan and I could be divorced simply by submitting the paper to the city court. With a proud expression, his mother asserted, "Isn't it about time you gave up? There's no reason for you and Stefan to stay married anymore. Get out, you freeloading, unemployed woman." I was taken aback by her audacity, but her certainty in her plan only fueled my determination. Thrilled by the prospect of freedom, I eagerly asked to take the divorce paper, stating, "I'm going to the city court right now. Thank you so much." My mother-in-law, who had likely expected me to resist divorce, was left dumbfounded by my unexpected response. Having submitted the divorce paper at the city court, I wasted no time in packing my belongings. Feeling it was necessary to inform Stefan's mother about the divorce, I headed to the main house and informed her that the process had been successful. Regarding the cabin I renovated, I assured her that I would leave it as is, and she was free to demolish it or use it as she pleased. My positive attitude about leaving surprised even my mother-in-law, who, though seeming happy about my departure, wished me luck as I packed. On the day of my departure, Stefan and his father, seemingly realizing that I was truly leaving, expressed concern, asking, "Are you really going? What will we do without Rachel?" I smiled and thanked them for letting me use the cabin. I explained that since there was no point in being married anymore, and we were now divorced, it was time for me to move on. As I organized my belongings, I completed my move to a luxury apartment, a change I had been arranging for. Not long after settling into my new apartment, my mother-in-law called me awkwardly, saying, "Rachel, I need to ask you something." Cheerfully, I responded, "What's up? How's the cabin I'm using right now?" She then inquired about money, mentioning that Stefan had told her I was giving his father $33,000 a month. Confirming that it was true, I explained that despite her earlier accusation of being an unemployed freeloader, I was indeed working. She seemed surprised, thinking I had quit my job. I clarified that I hadn't quit but left the company to become the president of a new company, setting up a remote work system. Her reaction was one of disbelief, and I sighed, realizing that even Stefan was unaware of my promotion. Considering his attitude since we started living together, it seemed he never truly thought of himself as a husband. When asked about my earnings, including my side job, I nonchalantly mentioned it was roughly around $2 million. I may have exaggerated a bit with the $2 million figure. It's just a hassle to explain the exact figures. With that much money, could you lend us some? Actually, Father was laid off, and he kept it hidden. We've been managing somehow with the $3,000 you've been giving us. Neither Stefan nor I knew about it. It all made sense to me now. My father-in-law's words about it being pitiful to ask his son for money were just a pretense to get me to pay. He probably assumed I had money due to my superior position at our former company, and as a result, sweetly scammed me out of $3,000 a month under the guise of living expenses. In the end, I didn't mind too much since it allowed me to live peacefully in that quiet cabin. Well, I'm divorced from Stefan now, so I don't have any connection with your family, right? When I asserted this, my mother-in-law pleaded, "That's not true. To me and to Stefan, you're still family. Come back to us." I immediately declined, recognizing the potential for being used again. Stepping back into a relationship with Stefan would bring me no benefits. We were now complete strangers, and I found it uncomfortable for them to keep calling me family. Besides, they were the ones who drove me out in the first place. I'm really enjoying my life alone now. It's pretty much the same as when I was married, mostly living alone. The difference is, back then, I didn't spend money on myself, and $3,000 was taken from me every month. I prefer my current life much better. Goodbye, then. I ended the call without hesitation, not understanding why they thought I would return. For my mother-in-law, it must have been a last-ditch effort. In fact, Stefan's salary wasn't that great, and he had a habit of saying, "I can't do it," and passing work to others. This trait, displayed in both our personal life and at the office, left him deemed unreliable, and he remained a regular employee without any salary increase. On top of that, with his father laid off and his mother being a housewife, they couldn't maintain their large house and ended up selling it. Now the three of them are living in the cabin I renovated. While it's just right for one person, it must be quite uncomfortable for three people in that cramped space. Since then, I haven't thought about them and continue to live peacefully.